from WABE in Atlanta. This is a special closer look broadcasting live from, wait for it, FiNCA to FiLTER. But it's the one in the old Fourth Ward, which is still great too. So it's Coffee Conversations with Rose Scott. And if you don't know, I am little old Rose Scott, all 5'2" of me. It's our monthly live broadcast in partnership with the Community Foundation for Greater Atlanta. And this time, our destination is the historic old Fourth Ward neighborhood. And as we do with all our coffee conversations, the topics are about the community. And today we're focusing on the Beltline, the good, the bad. I can't say ugly, so I'll say the challenging, because there's an Atlanta City Council member here, and he won't come back on the show if I say it like that. So, what is the Beltline, in case you don't know? Of course, it's a 22-mile loop of paths, trails, and maybe transit one day, connecting Atlanta neighborhoods. Now, we all know the Beltline is a great place, right? Except for you folks on the scooters, but that's a whole nother show. There's a lot of activity on the Beltline, and if you're a small business, it's great, perhaps. So we're going to talk about that. Just how great is the Beltline for small businesses? And as we do with every coffee conversation, we begin with the owners of the coffee shop, and today it is Kayla Bellman, owner and founder of FiNCA to FiLTER. These your cousins?
Yes.
Well, first of all, thank you for hosting WABE and Coffee Conversations with Rose Scott.
It's our pleasure.
Now, I gotta admit now, y'all have had me on the menu for a minute.
You're right, Rose. Two times, actually.
Right. And how much revenue has been coming in? Because it's the Rose by another name?
Yep, a Rose by any other name. Rose, you've made us rich, so thank you. We owe everything to you.
Yeah. Is that one of your top sellers?
Yeah, actually, it really is.
And is that the drink of the day?
That is the drink of the day.
Let's go ahead and get this out the way. What is in the Rose by any other name drink?
Yeah, so it is house-made rose and cardamom syrup, your milk of choice, portrait espresso, and love.
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 Aw, love.
Secret ingredient.
Yeah. Drinks for everybody. Kayla, why this location? Because you have other locations as well, right? But you all just got here. Pretty new, right?
Yeah, so FiNCA has been around since 2020. Yes, we did open in the heart of the pandemic, quite frankly, because I couldn't get a job, so I made jobs for us. And we decided to open in Old Fourth Ward because we met the right partner. As I'm sure many of the guests today will share, that leasing is difficult and it's important. And when you find the right partner that you're willing to hitch your wagon to, it can make all the difference. So we found that here.
Was the Beltline, being so close to the Beltline, was that an amenity that was important to you? Or you think if it wasn't, you still would have moved here?
Ooh. So we actually have now 2 going on 4 locations right along the Beltline in the overlay district. So I'm a big believer in the Beltline. And for us, that was because FiNCA is premised on wanting to see ourselves, the LGBTQ community, represented in business, both in employees, in ownership, and managers, as investors. And so for us to have access that the Beltline provides, it means that many more people get to see queer folks kicking butt. Mm-hmm. And we also partner with wonderful vendors such as Portrait, who many of you are drinking. Mm-hmm. And so by having spots on the Beltline, we've got that much more access to Atlanta to share our stories and to share our partner stories.
FiNCA to FiLTER, where does that come from?
Yeah, so FiNCA to FiLTER means farm to filter.
Okay.
Back in, 2016, I was living in Guatemala, and this was also when the farm to table movement was big in New York. And my friend Brooke and I, hi Brooke, made a blog, which we yelled at no one followed our blog, big surprise, about how we would like to change the coffee industry if we had the opportunity. And so fast forward about 8 years later, when I got the opportunity to start FiNCA, I said, well, what should we name it? And thought, well, I've already got the Instagram.
What did you know about coffee? Did you know anything about coffee and the beans and the different types of beans and all that?
So when I worked in Guatemala, I got to work with a lot of folks who produce coffee, both large plantations and also produced like subsidiaries. So they had coffee plants, they picked it, they sold it for what they could. And then I actually moved to Atlanta to go to grad school at Emory, and I studied humanitarian stuffs, got an MDP, Master's in Development Practice, and had my focus largely on coffee. And I was working on coffee-related projects when the pandemic happened and all that funding dried up, and hence why I looked inward to make a job.
That looking inward, but did you have any concerns about, well, first of all, it was a pandemic, which nobody was prepared for. Did people go, Kayla, now is not the time to do this?
Yeah, everyone. However, we continue to have neighbors. You know, our very first customer is a loyal friend and patron still to this day. So people showed up, albeit in a couple masks and many feet away. But slowly but surely, we've built a brand that we're pretty proud of.
What about resources that you needed to, or you looked for in terms of opening your shops? And I know there are some initiatives and programs for folks on the Beltline. In other words, I'm asking, did you get some help with money and all that stuff? Did Amira Faroki help you with get some financing?
Not yet. I started FiNCA by pouring pour-overs, hundreds of them a week, and saved money. Bought a very small espresso machine, made a lot of lattes, saved money, bought a larger espresso machine, and then finally, we were credit worthy, and I was able to obtain small loans from Invest Atlanta. But I will say, never enough.
Never enough. Being a business near the Beltline has its advantages, right? But are there some challenges for you that you feel that you would maybe like to see some change, or you have some concerns?
The Beltline is very expensive, albeit I have I have leases that am in partnership with great people that there's a lot of mutual trust there. There has to be. We signed 20-year leases.
Wait, all your locations are 20-year leases?
10 years with 10-year extensions. So if it doesn't go well, my house, your house, they're taking it all.
I ain't getting mine, but you know,
But
I got a couch. You share with the cat. I mean, we're good.
Thank you, Rose.
But you have some concerns.
Yeah. So I've got leases that I'm okay with, but I've got a lot more friends and colleagues who are interested in accessing the Beltline and what it has to offer, and there's not yet enough resources or opportunity to go around.
With your staff, many of them, they commute in or they live in this area?
It depends. At the West End location in particular, most everyone is a resident, and so it's been interesting when there's severe weather. Most of our team, walks, short commute, so it makes those decisions different. At this location, the cost of living is definitely different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Transit and mobility issues are such a huge factor. And I know I made a joke about the scooters, and I know for some people they need the scooters to get back and forth to work. I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about those other folks that just be on the Beltline zipping, like it's the Grand Prix or something like that. But transit and mobility issues, is that a concern for you as a business owner too?
Absolutely. It's the difficulty with the Beltline is that they're doing an awesome thing in restricting parking to make more urbanity, but the reality for the business, while I want to invest in something like that, how many of you commuted here in a car?
I mean, if you parked somewhere where you probably shouldn't be parking, I would go check your cars.
Yeah, so there's real implications of those decisions as well, but absolutely. The ability to have access via the Beltline for all sorts of commuters is definitely one that is exciting and makes our weekends killer.
I don't want to be too nosy, but I'm a journalist. You have a fixed rate in terms of your lease because, as you know, what you can't control is the market. Bigger businesses come in. I mean, you look on the Beltline where we are, there's some beautiful big businesses coming in, and sometimes that can affect other people, the smaller folks. Your monthly leases, are you able to?
Free, just kidding. Yeah, when it comes to leases, you can either sign a shorter lease, likely for cheaper, or you can or for more expensive, but less risk, right? If it doesn't work, you can get out in 3 years, or you can sign a more expensive or a cheaper lease for longer. We've opted for that with our bet being that the rent will go up and that we are locked into a rate that at least can't go up for the next 10 to 20 years. However, we've also committed ourselves to this neighborhood and this business for the next 10 to 20 years, which, when it comes to committing to the spaces that we are a part of, is one that we're happy and proud to make. But from an ownership level, it also has, real risk and weight to those decisions.
If there is going to be transit, and that's a whole nother show, but if there's going to be light rail or whatever you have, and I'll ask the council member this, you think that will help small businesses having rail on the Beltline?
I'm not sure that it would help or hurt small business. For me, the question is, would that money be better invested in other transit methods, like perhaps a MARTA or a MARTA bus system extension? One of the things that I would love to do, I live down the street from a MARTA station, but there's no MARTA station close by here, so it's not a suitable mode of transport.
If there is light rail on the Beltline, and let's say it stopped somewhere near Pond City Market, folks could walk here.
Yeah, that would be super interesting.
Are you a light rail fan? Are you pro?
You know what? I'm actually very excited to sit.
You not want to
and
answer
learn.
that question? It's okay.
I'll believe it when I see it.
Oh, ooh. Boy, Councilmember Faroki's like, damn it, why did I agree to come on this show with Rose? But getting back to your business here, how important is it that you have a great community partnership, community engagement with the folks here? Because you have folks who've come out. I mean, look at this crowd here. It's amazing.
It is amazing. Community is everything. We at FiNCA, we really try not to take a single guest, a single transaction lightly, because it can quite literally be the difference between making and breaking a day or a week. And beyond the patrons of the community and the neighbors of the community, we are in deep community with the Beltline and that organization. I just spoke with Miranda, the Culture and Arts Director, about a big mural that we're partnering with for our new location on the other side of the Beltline. So we've got community, we've got support to help elevate our story. So I just ask that everyone keeps coming back.
So you're going to open another location on the other side of town.
Surprise.
Surprise? Well, you just told everybody.
Just kidding. We actually announced it about a year ago.
Yeah?
We've got a project, FiNCA to FiLTER, and a wine concept called Side Saddle, which will be a natural wine and cocktail bar on the southeast side in the Grant Park area, right on the Beltline.
That's exciting.
Thank you.
Where do you hope, perhaps FiNCA to FiLTER as a brand, as businesses, where do you hope that you all be in maybe 5 years?
Yeah, in 5 years, we hope to continue to create opportunity that's meaningful for coffee professionals, so folks who want to stay in the industry can afford to stay in the industry, and that we can continue to make spaces that feel really good and that bring value to the neighborhoods in which they reside in. And we're stopping at 4.
You sure?
Maybe.
Going back to 2020 and to now, what have you learned? What's been the biggest takeaway from not only being a business owner, but also a business owner with a unique, advantage, or as it relates to the Beltline? What's been that biggest learning curve for you?
Ask for help and foster community with other like-minded folks. Sarah walked in today from 3 Parks and immediately just, getting on around what the real difficulties of doing what we do is. So definitely look for mentors, talk to folks, ask questions, and negotiate really hard on your leases. That is definitely what I've learned.
How tight is the old Fourth Ward business community?
To be honest, I've only cracked the surface, and the surface is pretty awesome.
Yeah?
Yeah.
And if you had one thing to say to city leaders or Beltline folks, what would it be? What do you want them to know?
Invest in queer folks, people of color, and women, and get local business, prioritize local businesses on the Beltline. We don't want to have more big box stuff on the Beltline. The Beltline is for us, and keep it that way.
All right. All right. Kayla Bellman is founder of FiNCA to FiLTER Coffee Shops. Best of luck to you and the entire staff. Thank you for hosting us again here today. Thank you for the Rose by Another Name. It's going to stay on the menu, right?
Absolutely.
You sure? All right.
Each season it comes back.
We'll talk about royalties later after this. This is Closer Look. We're back in a moment.
The microphone.
Yeah. I'm okay. All right, I'll lean in. Yeah. All right, let's do a photo, Rose. One.
Amir, were you elected in 2012? No, when were you elected? 17, yeah.
Yeah, I'm good. Yeah.
And you're listening to Closer Look, broadcasting live from FiNCA to FiLTER. For this month's Coffee Conversation, a community event that happens every month in partnership with the Community Foundation for Greater Atlanta. I just want to say they've been great partners, not because they all showed up today, but just because they really are great partners. And partnerships is what it's all about, so I'm going to talk about that as well. We're in the Old Fourth Ward neighborhood, and it's all about businesses doing business on the Beltline. And now later in the program, I'll speak with some small business owners. But for now, I'm going to welcome in Atlanta City Council member Amir Faroqui and also Juan Mendoza, president of the Old Fourth Ward Business Association. Councilman Faroqui, you have 26 minutes to figure all this out about Beltline. You ready?
Yeah. Ready? Let's do it.
Let's talk about the Beltline.
With a live audience, nonetheless.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's begin here. When you look at the Beltline, its current state right now, and I know you're going to be honest with me because I feel like you always have. How would you assess the Beltline being a pretty positive amenity for small businesses?
So first, excited you're in the Old Fourth Ward. Been waiting for you to do one in this neck of the woods, and I imagine this is what it's like for Wait, Don't Tell Me. They
get about one or two.
Yeah. But very cool to be here with you and to have a live audience. So to your question, look, I think the Beltline has been such a success, and you can argue there are negative externalities to it, rightfully so, because I think Atlantans were hungry for really great public space. You know, I think we don't have these spaces in the city where you can congregate because we're built around the car for the most part, and this is not a city, aside from some pockets, where there's street life and you walk out of your door and you see the world going past. And the Beltline has become that, and its popularity has generated all sorts of outcomes, both positive and negative. I think for small businesses, it's different depending on where you sit on the Beltline. It's different dynamics based on density, cost, et cetera. But because the Beltline is public space, because there's been public dollars invested in it, we want it to retain local flavor. That doesn't mean it's exclusive to big box stuff. There's a symbiotic relationship there to some degree. But I think about small businesses as, a big box is where you go to catch your breath when you're running around New York City or someplace, and a small business is where to have your breath taken away. That's how I think about the folks in this room. They're creating spaces that provide delight or authentic local connection to a place, and so we need to be doing everything we can to facilitate that. And Invest Atlanta's played a big role in that. You
mentioned local flavor. Is there enough equity in that local flavoring, you think, from end to end?
Well, it depends how you define equity, but...
well, how do you define equity?
So I think there's gender, race, economic. I mean, there are all these ways we can and should define equity, but I think ultimately just do people have a fair shot as a small business owner to set up shop? And some of that goes to the spaces we allow to be built in the city, right? Zoning code. You go to France or Paris and you'll walk down the street and you'll see a 100 square foot shop tucked into a corner that's selling just orange juice, right? And we don't allow that type of space. You have to have a bathroom. You have to have there are all these rules that apply. Sometimes good for ADA compliance and elsewhere, but it's tougher to find a place like FiNCA to FiLTER or 3 Parks because of how we structure space in America and in the South. And so I think part of the obligation of the city is, can you create spaces or incentivize developers to build or redevelop spaces that allow for a diversity of experiences and uses?
Is that a challenge because you're representing the city in terms of when it comes to incentivizing those bigger developments, because you want to make sure everyone has something that's attractive for them, but sometimes there's a bigger influence with the bigger development as opposed to the small folks?
Yeah, look, I think big developers in the city, they have different personalities and flavors.
Really?
Yeah, look, I mean, right here in New City where 3 Parks is, I mean,
Yeah.
that's a major developer. That's world-class architecture. I mean, those architects cost a premium. He found a lot of money to get it done. The landscape architecture. Now, the rents are a premium, but for that developer, I'm not saying all developers like this, the local experience and the local representation is really important. And I think that's where politicians, policymakers can have influence on those developers when they come to the city and say, hey, I need this rezoned, or we want this public benefit. You say that this is great, this is a net positive, but if you do this, we need to see X, Y, Z as well.
Okay, I want to get to Juan in just a moment, but I want to ask you this question. As it is now, is there enough big development on the Beltline? Is it too much, or this is getting out of hand and you think there could be more?
Look, I'm a pro-density person, so I think we're not an overbuilt city. There's plenty of room for more people, and we're not building enough housing as it is. So
Wait, hold on.
I'm pretty I'm a pretty
up.
moderate, balanced guy on a lot of things. But when it comes to housing, especially on the Beltline, we should, because the Beltline is a transportation corridor as much as it is a lovely public space, we should be finding ways to build as much housing as possible.
You say we're not an overbuilt city, but
Yeah.
in terms of, because housing for residents is one thing, and then and then commercial, you see there's room for both to, Atlanta's only so big.
Yeah,
Y'all keep
we
tearing
have
down big,
lower
beautiful
population-
buildings.
We have lower population density than Fresno, California, right? So I don't buy this argument that we're full. And I represent the smallest council district in the city because it's the most densely populated,
Yeah.
and we have plenty of space to grow up and to build more houses.
Are we
or-
full, folks?
Yeah.
Yes or no?
Yeah. Look, and I'll say this: there's nothing that gets people more fired up than zoning and the housing discussions. But cities are either growing or dying; they're not static. And this is a city that, for a number of decades now, has been growing. And you can talk about the growing pains and the negative aspects of it, but the alternative is stasis. And you look at cities that are static, and they're not doing great. And I think how we manage that growth, what we want that growth to look like, who we
Okay.
invite to the table in it, is where the difference is made in the type of city we are.
All right, I want to turn now to Juan. The Beltline, as you said, you represent small businesses in the Old Fourth Ward. Not all of them are near the Beltline, but for the ones that are, what are you hearing about the good and the challenges?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, Rose, thanks for having us today. And it really takes initiatives like this to support our small businesses to get them successful, and happy to be here with the mayor, who's been very supportive of the association. Beltline, pros and cons. I think one of the stigmas with the Beltline or perspective is that you're guaranteed success because it's prime location. And I think once entrepreneurs and business owners move in, they start navigating the challenges. But overall, I think it's been a great economic development for the Old Fourth Ward specifically. We were we were catalyzed by the Beltline in conjunction with Ponce City Market to really spearhead the economic growth that we're seeing in the area. I think one of the biggest challenges that's everybody's brought up is the rents and how that's sharply increased. And it's a little bit of a challenge between longtime property owners wanting to get a return on the investment. But I think we need to create some initiatives to ensure that we still provide opportunities for truly small local businesses, those creative entrepreneurs to come in. I feel like the way things are going, that barrier just keeps increasing. So the question I always charge people is, do you think like the Nonies, the Georgia Beer Gardens, could they still be created in today's environment with the way the rent barrier is set up? And Kayla hit a good point with lease negotiation. I think we could do a better job on educating our entrepreneurs on skills in that way. Now, how do we tackle that?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's we do a lot of heavy focus on residential affordable housing initiatives, but I do think we could start thinking about commercial affordability and what does that look like. I don't know, how we do that. Is it incentives for the developers where they can kind of offset that loss of revenue there? But it's just, again, trying to brainstorm, because I imagine that as the Beltline continues to grow, that what we're experiencing in the 04th Ward is just they're going to experience on the south side and the southwest side all these influx of economic developments, and businesses can be displaced, and it can be a harder barrier to come in.
Foot traffic versus folks driving in. What do you hear from folks in the association about that traffic and that securing enough, I guess, pathway for folks if they want to come to the shop? Maybe they live in Smyrna somewhere. Parking. Everyone complains about parking, and I get it. But also, too, for folks in the community, if they want to walk or bike. Are your association members, how would you say they view that?
I really, honestly, I get a mixed perspective. I know some owners on the Beltline that have no parking, and they have a mass influx of customers that they're able to pull in from the Beltline and from different metro areas in the city. And then you have different areas on the Beltline where parking's a huge issue, and they can't get anybody in the door because of it. So I think a lot of it comes a little bit on strategy, but also the way the zoning is now when we're coming up with these concepts, I think entrepreneurs have to think about, hey, these are the challenges now that you keep hearing coming up. How do I overcome those if I'm going to decide to be on the Beltline?
Is that one of the number one issues you talk? Someone comes to you and says, hey, Juan, I'm thinking about opening up, a cat hotel for wayward cats on the Beltline. What do you tell them?
I honestly, just to make sure that they've put in all the research to understand the pros and cons that come into that. Pros are you're in prime location. You're in a great, if they're doing the 04th Ward Beltline, you're in a great community. It's very supportive. Residents support the businesses support the resident capacity. But yes, parking, transit, rents, and resources, capital, and education.
Councilman Faroki, when we talk about in terms of mobility and transit, and I know parklets were we did a show on parklets, and it was amazing. We got so much feedback. Little initiatives like that encourage people to walk and come into a community. When you look at this community, Old Fourth Ward, would you like to see some changes in terms of the streets? Do you want more one-way streets? Do you want no turn on rights?
Well, I co-authored a paper on no turn on right
know.
for Midtown Downtown with Councilmember Dozier. I hope it gets through. Look, I think there's varying opinions on this amongst council members. I'm of the mindset that one of our obligations, if we want to grow into the city we all expect and believe Atlanta is, and kind of a world-class livability characterization, we have to make sure that when you walk out of this building or any building you walk out of, it is a pleasant space to be. That means, can I walk from point A to point B? Is it safe to do so? Am I inspired by the spaces? Am I connected to where I want to live and work? And we have pockets of it. We're stitching it together. But I tend to think that, especially in town, in these neighborhoods that I represent, where there's a hunger for more walkability, more urbanism, the public sphere and the design of our streets and intersections and spaces requires much more thought and more investment than we've been giving it.
As it relates to Old Fourth Ward, then are there some designs that you would like to see implemented, or some that you would like to see maybe we need to either get rid of or modify?
Are you trying to have a conversation about the streetcar?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say over here on Glen Iris.
You know me very well.
Welcome to streetcars. But for example, over here on Glen Iris, it's 15 years ago it was a sleepy street. Now, just given population density and traffic flow, it's a cut-through street like alongside Boulevard, and it's really unsafe for pedestrians. So we've identified $400K in dollars to put in bulb outs, to put in some rapid flashing beacons, to make it safer for folks who are walking to and fro. The proposed streetcar extension on the Beltline, look, it is really hard to do big things, and I think it's easy to poke holes in it. The Beltline has always been envisioned as a transit corridor. What that transit looks like is a fair space for debate. I'm more agnostic on the technology, and there's other technologies than light rail you could put in place, but I'd rather see light rail than nothing there.
Okay.
Kayla talked about her employees not living near this location. Part of making the Beltline accessible to everyone, jobs, social life, et cetera, is to put in place transit so you can connect the neighborhoods that are along it. Now, we know Atlanta, we know how long it takes to do things. Even when this gets built, the vision of transit all the way along the Beltline is going to take a long time and dollars that have not yet been identified. But I think you have to be willing to take the bold step to do these big projects. The Beltline itself is a bold step, and I sometimes think back that if you had told folks who live in this neighborhood 15 years ago that, hey, we want to build this thing called the Beltline, and there are going to be tens of thousands of people walking in your backyard, people would have been like, no, I don't want that, right? And yet it's been this net positive for folks because of its success, and it's generated a lot of economic development and growth for the city.
Juan talked about perhaps zoning modifications, zoning changes. What would you like to see as it relates to the Beltline and any zoning?
Yeah, we've done
issues?
a good bit of it. We've prohibited drive-throughs within a footprint. We've prohibited gas stations. We now don't require parking for new developments. That doesn't mean they won't be built, but there's no parking minimum because we want to prioritize pedestrian activity. I think, to me, the biggest opportunity continues to be, and need continues to be, housing. So are we allowing for density and more housing as aggressively as possible along the Beltline? That means everything from townhomes to condos to apartments, multiple stories, tiny homes. All these things should be in play as you approach the Beltline.
I have a question from a listener that says, Rose, we do not need any more big development on the Beltline, just more small businesses. Ask the council member about that.
Yeah, you need both. I mean, small businesses need people to patronize them. I mean, the FiNCA has, I don't know how many hundreds of residents are in this building, but that's a built-in customer base for her.
But that's unique. That's not every business, though.
But why should this be unique? I mean, let's say there wasn't a FiNCA here. There are plenty of other coffee shops that pop up in the neighborhood to serve the folks who live here and work here. I think it's symbiotic. We like to have these conversations of good and evil, bad and good, right and wrong. But fundamentally, it's much more complex.
But sometimes things are right and wrong.
No, I agree. I don't think a 300-unit apartment building along the Beltline is in and of itself a bad thing. I think the question is how it's designed, who has access to it, does it support local business, can you integrate local business into it? I mean, these are all, I think, fair questions to ask, but it's not in and of itself a bad thing.
Is there a difference in affordability, what that definition is on the Beltline as opposed to affordability somewhere else? And what is that mark? Because we talk about this all the time on our program. If the average rent in Atlanta is $2,200, is that affordable? That's what I'm asking. Is there a difference there if you talk about what's affordable on the Beltline? Because if you build a 300 apartment, thing on the Beltline, I'm sure the rent's not going to be,
right,
$11.26.
Well, that's why we put in place. In fact, credit to Mayor Dickens, when he was a council member 8 years ago or so, he spearheaded an inclusionary zoning policy for the Beltline overlay. So when you build a building like this, you have to set aside a certain number of units that are affordable based on a formula of area median income. So those sorts of things integrate levels of affordability. Is it enough? No, but that's where supply and demand plays a role, and that's why you need to build more housing to meet the demand of folks who want to live not just in this neighborhood, but across the city.
Meeting the demand of what type of household, though? Because you can meet the demand of someone of a household that's, I don't know, $165,000 a year. You know that Atlanta has this income disparity. You know that. I don't have to tell you that. So if you're talking about meeting the demand of whom? You
need more housing at all price points. And it's just like when you go to the store, if there's not enough of a certain product, they're going to jack the price on it, right? And the same is true with housing. When we don't have enough housing, prices rise. And we need to be doing everything we can to incent, because even when you build new housing, when this goes up, this market rate apartment, it creates more volume to fill, and it puts downward price pressures on older housing, right? Because folks who are moving into this building are leaving either older units or they're coming from out of town, but it opens up new housing that previously didn't exist. And that's a macro view of it, but, and there's levers the city should be pulling to incent affordable housing as well. But you also need to say, hey, we have to build more housing, and we have to be comfortable with the fact that not everyone in the city can live on a quarter-acre lot or half-acre lot in a single-family home. And that's a very controversial thing to say in some neighborhoods. Yeah. And I represent some of those residents. We have those hard conversations.
Oh, I know. I get the emails.
Yeah. But look, my job is not, and maybe some of my fellow council members disagree, my job is not to worry about your property value. My job is to make sure we're making the best policy decisions that support the health of the city. And if you do that well, your property values will inherently rise. But you know, we need to be thinking about the long-term health of the city beyond however long I sit in the city council seat, because it's not going to be forever. That as the city grows, how do you prepare a city to absorb that growth? And how do you make sure that it's equitable and inclusive? And those are the conversations we should be having, not, hey, I don't like this, some stranger parked in front of my house on my street.
Well, we can have a whole nother conversation about, because some folks want certain things in their neighborhood, and some, you know, again, it's another conversation, but, you know, people are against tiny homes, but yet a huge, you know, mansion pops up and they have no problem with that.
That same mansion has a apartment over the garage out back, so I don't, that's another conversation.
Yes. You heard what the council member just said in terms of what we should be doing as a city. Anything that stood out to you that you either agree with or that you want to counter with?
I think outside looking in, it's you know, I get to live every day of how fast our growth is happening in the 04th Ward, and the challenges that we're experiencing are very difficult to find solutions for. I think we have this momentum that we can see a vision of becoming a very dense area, but how do we make sure that, again, leave that equity? We don't want to leave behind the businesses and residences that help build the 04th Ward.
Juan, have you had businesses that have had to close or move because it was just the lease was too high, or it wasn't working for them, as it relates to the Beltline?
Yeah. We call it displacement. And right now, you've had a few businesses that you have successful businesses turning over revenue and can afford the lease, but maybe they're selling to the developer, and now they're at a juncture where it's going to take 2 years to redevelop, and it doesn't make sense. Like, I'm not going to wait. The business owner's not going to wait 2 years to come back to that property. And service guys. So, like, I've talked to developers, and you talk to them, and you're like, yeah, I offered them to come back, right? I offered them to come back at something reasonable, but they made the business decision that I'm just going to go ahead and move that somewhere else. In that, just saying displacement on that. So, if we can figure out ways to continue growth the way we're going, and again, still provide the equity opportunities for the residents and businesses, would be ideal for us, right? But now the 04th Ward is so hard to figure out because you have the historic aspect of it, you have the large corporations, and then you have the small local businesses. So it's truly very diverse, and it's very hard to, as it quickly goes, to try to figure that out and solve it, you know, on the fly.
But you both agree that there is a solution there for everyone. Everyone gets a piece of the pie.
That's what I see. I see that if we create initiatives at the city level with our developers, with our nonprofits, that we can truly find a solution for everybody to have great businesses, live in great spaces around great parks, and just amazing opportunities. I think as a community, we can figure that out.
You think we can achieve that by 2030 when the Beltline is supposedly going to be finished or completed, most of it? I
think, look, I've sit with leaders at MARTA, Beltline, senior leaders at the city, and the conversations that are having they're truly robust discussions like, hey, you know, they want our perspective, what's going on at the ground level. You know, we have that perspective, and they've been open to allowing us to sit with them and provide that feedback, because they truly are trying to hear where we're coming from, what's working, what's not working, what do you see the challenges are. And for that, I really do appreciate our leaderships.
Councilmember Faroki, you all have the Beltline Marketplace program. I think you have a Beltline Business Ventures. So you have resources out there for small businesses. I just have an email from a listener that says, hey, where can I go to even begin talking about wanting to open up a business on the Beltline? Yeah,
that's a credit to Atlanta Beltline Inc. for launching that program. If you walk along the Beltline and past the skate park, under the bridge right there, you see some shipping containers that are small local businesses trying to get their toehold in the city. And I think if folks are interested in taking part in that program, they should reach out to Atlanta Beltline. I believe they have some information on their website. Where do you see this community in a Beltline in, let's say, by 2030? This community or the entire Beltline? Well, as it relates to the Beltline. Yeah. Look, when people talk about the Beltline instinctively, I think people think about this section of the Beltline because it was the first one that was completed. It's the most built out. It's obviously the most heavily visited just based on the things that are around it. I think this corridor is going to get denser, which is part of the argument for why transit's appropriate in this corridor. Yeah. But there'll be inevitably rightful conversations around who can access the space. You know, can you live here if you're making 30K a year? You know, can you get to where you want to get? I mean, you know, there's a MARTA bus line that runs a block up the street, 899. So we have a bus line here. There's supposed to be BRT on North Avenue. You have the train potentially getting put in. This is a very transit-rich neighborhood. The question is, chicken or egg, what will be supported over the next 20 to 30 years? And I'm hopeful. I think that policymakers will have to make decisions because the market left to its own device will inherently reward some and exclude others, right? So as a policymaker or government in general, my view is that you should be using the power of local government and state government to make sure there's equitable access, whether it's jobs, housing, et cetera, of small business, where the market is not allowing it.
And I want to get your thoughts on this too, because you are part of the policymakers. Is it hard then, because I know you get feedback from the historic and legacy neighborhoods, and you get feedback from small business owners. Everybody wants something for them. How do you balance making sure that you can convince them that we are committed to this equity piece here?
Well, I think one is talking about it, developing programs, connecting people with programs that exist to support them. Like I live a block up the street. I walk by this location every day. My street.
You're not buying coffee, you just walking past?
No,
See,
I
that's
buy
the
coffee
problem.
too. I buy coffee
kidding.
too.
I'm just kidding.
They got a window. You can walk up your dog. They made it easy. You know, I have legacy homeowners on my street who've been there for 30 years. I've got new homeowners. I have all types of folks. And I think part of what a great city does is ensuring that folks who have been in a neighborhood have all the tools possible to try and stay in the neighborhood if they can. And that you're also telling the story of the neighborhood and those people to new residents, because the tendency is for new residents to come in and say, well, I'm going to lead this neighborhood association. We're going to do things this way, and ignoring the fact that people have been striving to make this neighborhood better.
Yeah, that's
for
a whole
decades.
other conversation when you move in somebody's community and then you want to change.
And to be fair, a lot of the growth in the old Fourth Ward, while there has been displacement, a lot of it's been on vacant lots. I mean, this was an industrial.
I know. I used to play basketball over here, and they would say, "You better get out of here by 9 o'clock." I'm like, "What? We're just playing ball." So
you haven't seen a lot of single-family homes torn down. To the extent they have, they're now duplexes. But a lot of the dense growth in the old Fourth Ward has come on previously industrial lots.
yeah. Atlanta City Councilman Amir Faroki and also Juan Mendoza, President of the Old Fourth Ward Business Association. Thank you both for taking the time. I really appreciate it. I really do. Thank you.
Thank you.
I knew I couldn't go to a show. Bringing up scooters.
And Closer Look continues broadcasting live from FiNCA to FiLTER in the old 4th Ward neighborhood. We're talking about doing business on the Beltline as it relates to small businesses, so I want to go ahead and jump right into it because we have the people who probably we should be listening to the most, and these are business owners. So let's welcome in Emily Chan, co-owner of Jen Chan's with her wife Jen. Also Lakeisha Jones, the owner of Pink Pothos, an Atlanta-based houseplant retail store, which I need to visit because I kill every plant. Sarah Pierre, who's the owner of Three Parks Wine Shop, and also Johnny Martinez, co-owner of Joystick Game Bar. Welcome.
Thank you for having us.
All right, I'm going to go around the table here. All right, yes. The great thing about doing business on the Beltline, I'm going to start with Sarah Pierre. What is it?
I will say density, meeting a lot of people. I love the diversity of the Beltline. I have 2 locations on the Beltline, and they both are very, very different.
Yeah.
One is more centered in like a residential community, so there we get to meet. We know about 80% of the people walking in the door, whereas our location, which is right across the street, I think every day I see a new person. So there's a little bit more potential to meet more people, right? Make a little bit more of a bigger impact, if you will. Whereas the other one, it's just way more community rooted.
Johnny Martinez, you're an OG, as they say, been in the old 4th neighborhood for a few years now. The good, we'll start with the good.
The good is that there's the Beltline finally overtook Terminal A as being the place that most people walked in Atlanta, right? It's great to see people out on the street. We rely on cars so much. And I think if you want the feel of the city, then you need to have what cities have, which is people walking around, doing what people do everyday lives, not even thinking about it that much. So.
All right, Emily.
Yes.
The good about having a business on or near the Beltline.
We are definitely near the Beltline on Carroll Street in Cabbagetown. So, I mean, the diversity, for sure. We've definitely seen an increase in foot traffic. We've got the mural, the art, the culture, everything like that. Memorial Drive has changed.
Yes.
But yeah, that's the good.
Lakeisha, your story is a little bit different, but I want to go ahead and you're operating a houseplant retail shop, so you've had to kind of navigate this as a startup.
Absolutely. So I am a small business that did get started. So one of the big things for me was the foot traffic. I did not exist anywhere else, so no one knew who I was. So with the people coming along from the Beltline that lived in the community and that also came to the Beltline from other locations around Metro Atlanta, I was able to introduce my business to them.
And you went through a program that was with the Beltline, correct?
Right, as mentioned earlier, the Beltline Marketplace. So they were looking for 6 Black businesses to start business along the Beltline, just because there's not enough brown and Black businesses on the Beltline in affordable commercial real estate spaces. So it gave us the opportunity to learn business and to actually introduce ourselves to the Beltline.
Have you been able to stay on the Beltline?
Yes. So they allowed us the opportunity we were in lease, so we stayed along the length of the program, and now I have graduated from the program, and I have now been able to open up a new place along the Beltline. Correct. Yes.
All right, let's talk about the bad stuff. Or the challenging. Johnny, what's been the challenging?
I will say, I have a bit of an odd relationship with the Beltline because we're technically in the Beltline Overlay District, which means we help pay for the Beltline and we get the rents from the Beltline, but we see 0 activity from the Beltline. So I think when it comes to challenges with the Beltline, I personally have a few concerns with it. One is that it needs to connect. The Beltline can't just be a destination. It's supposed to be a part of the entire city, which means you should easily be able to connect to it, right? And that means the Beltline needs to connect to other parts of the city as well. So, for instance, there's no signage around here that lets you know that the King Center or the King Historic District is just 5 minutes away. Okay. That feels like you're not being a part of the actual community.
So you're taxed because you're in the Beltline overlay. do you feel like then, so, and I don't want to get in your business, but just, I'm sure it's a few $100s.
It's not too bad, but it's enough that it would pay some of our utilities for 1 month, and
Yeah.
I don't mind participating because I love what the Beltline is doing overall, but I would like to see it be a little more equitable, because if you are not directly on the Beltline, you are not actually benefiting from the Beltline.
And especially if you are you're a taxpayer.
You know, they
have an additional tax.
They got taxes from the business owners and from apartments, and not from the people who live in $1 million townhomes. And they're the ones who get the real benefit from being on here. I think they should participate in the expansion of the Beltline, and not the ones who aren't necessarily getting anything from it.
Ah, Emily, what do you think?
Same. I mean, you said everything. We are, you know, Cabbagetown, funky, amazing little neighborhood, and it is just completely, it is cut off, you know. So we got those emails maybe last year about the taxes and everything like that, and you know, all of the businesses sort of came together and were like, well, wait a minute.
Because you're not technically on the Beltline,
no.
and for folks who don't know the overlays, it's a region that's been sort of parceled out, and so that's
Right.
why you all are, you think
Yeah.
that's fair?
So, no, and you know, we have, you know, Krog there, and everyone goes there and takes pictures or makes music videos, and that's great, but there's no sign, you know. I think that's a great point, and I know that we've had meetings after meetings about, let's get some signage, let's point to the funky little neighborhoods that are around the Beltline, and show them all the businesses up and down there. That would be amazing, but people stop, they take some pictures, and then they turn back around, and they go to Krog Market, you know, and we're right there.
Sarah Pierre, you hear their plight because they're not exactly on the Beltline.
Yeah, and I do have a location that is on the Beltline, obviously very busy, and my other location, which is also on the Beltline, one of the newer sections of the Beltline. However, it doesn't have the same density. So I think that it is important to say that. I mean, there's a lot of differences on where you are on the Beltline. So yes, I am directly on the Beltline on both of my locations. However, one of them is just essentially people running. Obviously, they're not stopping to get wine, and
Why not?
people, I know, right? Yeah. And then say like strollers, right? But it's not people, you know, jumping on and off the Beltline to go grab a drink or grab a bottle of wine. So while I am on the Beltline and I am paying this tax, I'm not actually getting that, we'll say, you know, Beltline residual, right? The people that are there to shop or to kind of participate in Beltline things.
So, Lakeisha, you experiencing the same thing that Sarah just talked about?
Absolutely. You know, the Beltline is a very busy place, but you have to get people to stop. So what is it that's going to get those people to stop? Because, you know, the people in the area that live there, of course, they're going to support you, but they're mainly out there walking their dogs, you know, going for a run. I think a lot of my business actually came from people who were just visiting the Beltline and just fell upon the store and was like, oh, let me come in, take a look and see what you got. You know, so it is, what is it can we do to bring people in and kind of keep them consistent?
Well, I have a listener, Nasima. Houseplants, where is she? It's right there. So.
Well, I am, like as mentioned, in the Beltline Marketplace underneath the bridge. I actually started on the west end, down the street from the original FiNCA FiLTER on the west end. And then being in the Beltline Marketplace, the goal is to have multiple marketplaces around the Beltline. So I was able to move from the west end over to the east side, which was very helpful for my business. But currently I am closed for the winter because I count on so much of the foot traffic. And
The foot traffic.
yes, and if no one is out there to support my business, what am I going to do? So I do a lot of services. I am still very busy. I do online, but I'm actually moving back to the west end over by Pittsburgh Yards.
Really?
Oh, don't make that face.
We want you to be on this side of town. Right. So then, you know, listener also emailed saying, well, isn't this all about their marketing strategy? Well, I mean, look, you have a great marketing strategy all you want, but,
You know, I think what we're experiencing on Edgewood right now, there's been a lot of closings. There's been a lot of places that have closed over the last year. We've lost almost over a third of every bar and restaurant on Edgewood. And for the vast majority of them, it's because it was rent time and rents went up. So you have speculators and developers who go through and have price spots near the Beltline in the overlay district, and then they decide they want to charge Beltline pricing. But we're not on the Beltline. So there are places being pushed out over just speculation.
if you didn't have that extra tax, do you think you could be able to pay your employees a little bit more as well? I mean, what's the correlation there between doing business on and near the Beltline and what you're able or not able to do in terms of paying employees?
We guarantee a $15 minimum to all our employees regardless, and we offer everyone a healthy living stipend if we can. It wouldn't really impact the employees so much. It would impact us in being able to do other things, repairing something, getting something new in. And sometimes, spending $1,200 on a video game for us is going to be worth a lot more than that over the course of a year. But that's extra money that we need.
Emily, what about, other than your lease, but your greatest expenses, do you feel like you want to pay your employees more? You can't right now, or?
Well, I mean, it's just hard enough having a single business and paying rent.
Yeah.
Even the more successful you are, the more people you come in. I mean, I could wax poetic about being a business owner, but yeah, I mean, I think we could pay our employees more for sure. That's one of our goals. Then that's going to open up a whole conversation about tipping and fair wage across, which is something I would love to be able to do. But we've wanted to open up another location for probably, I think I've tried for 3 years. We've negotiated leases for a year with a place. That fell through. We just, no capital. Don't have enough money to open up another location. The leases everywhere, the rent is, there's no way. Like, it's just.
So the rent is just too damn high.
It's impossible.
It's high.
That came out of New York, by the way.
Yes, it's impossible.
It's high.
Yeah.
It's high?
It's high.
How high?
I mean, I'm across the street. You see that building?
I see that building.
It's
yeah.
high. Yeah. But I mean, it's.
What about do you feel comfortable saying that I believe we pay our employees a livable wage, or?
Yeah, I mean, the reality of it is I hire sommeliers, so there's just a wage that just goes with that. So, I mean, our payroll is my highest expense, no doubt.
Yes.
No doubt, yeah.
With just about 3 minutes left to go, I want to ask you all this. Do you see yourself maintaining where you are now in this location as it relates to the Beltline? Let's say 2 years, 5 years.
Can we get some parking on Carroll Street? I don't know. That's a really tough question. We live in our neighborhood. We work in our neighborhood. We don't want to go anywhere at all. But I know that our lease is coming up, and I know that it is going to increase. And I know that there's not a month that goes by that I don't have to maybe send a text to say, give me another day.
Yeah.
It's hard. So I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I hope so.
That's fair. Johnny?
Yeah, I'm going to keep Joystick Game Bar in Edgewood as long as I can, because at this point, I don't know how much of Joystick is Edgewood and how much of Edgewood is Joystick, so I feel like I want to keep it there, so because that's where we started, you know?
Yeah. Lakeisha?
I'm going to say my situation is just very unique. I've been in a position to where my rent is extremely affordable, and you guys would probably give me a side eye if you knew how much it was. So yes, I'll be fine for sure.
So should we all come over there to Pittsburgh Yards?
Well, that one is actually not in the Beltline
Right,
Marketplace
I know.
program, so it is a little bit more expensive, but I'm only leasing the land, and it's still really affordable.
All right. Sarah?
Well, my first location's been there for 11 years, and my rent is very, very manageable there. Hopefully, my landlord does not hear me. This one, you guys will hear about. So, as far as marketing, you will hear me market Three Parks Wine Shop for a very long time because I'm locked in Old Fourth Ward for 10 years, and I'm very excited about it. I'm happy to be here.
I think you just got a text message that says landlord.
Yeah, your rent just went up.
Sarah, Johnny, Lakeisha, and Emily, thank you both. Well, first off, thank you all for being here, and continued success. And everyone listening, please support all of your small businesses. It's like public media, public radio. Support us and support your small businesses, please. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that is it for this edition of Closer Look. Our producers, Daniel Razell, LaShawn Hudson, Tiffany Griffith, our engineer for the day, Sawyer Vanderworth, with assistance from Micah Middleton. I want to thank the entire WABE digital team, the video team, Zach and his team, and of course, FiNCA the FiLTER, Kayla, and everybody who worked today. Thank you all so much, and catch us next month. We'll tell you where on social media. Thank you all.